The morning sun rose slowly over the small quiet town as Officer Amir began his daily patrol. He walked along the familiar pathway of Greenview Park with his loyal K9 partner Bruno by his side. Bruno was a strong trained dog with sharp senses and a calm nature. For years he had worked with Amir and never behaved in a strange way. But today something felt different. The dog kept lifting his head as if he smelled something hidden in the gentle breeze. Amir noticed the change but assumed it was only a small distraction. The park was peaceful with children playing and families enjoying the soft morning air. Near the old swings a little boy named Sammy played alone. He was around 6 years old and carried a small wooden car that he pushed through the sand with quiet joy. His mother sat on a bench close by reading a book and keeping an eye on him from time to time. There was nothing unusual about the scene. The grass moved softly, the birds sang above the trees, and children laughed in the distance. Yet Bruno suddenly stopped walking. His tail lowered and his body grew stiff like he sensed something urgent. Without warning, the dog let out a powerful bark that echoed sharply across the park. Sammy looked up with wide eyes, and his mother quickly turned her head in surprise. Bruno barked again, even louder, with a voice filled with strong emotion. This was not a playful sound. It was a warning full of fear. Amir felt a quick chill run through his chest. In all his years working with Bruno, he had never heard him bark like this unless he sensed real danger. Amir held the leash firmly and tried to calm him, but Bruno refused to move back. Instead, he pulled forward with force, as if trying to reach the little boy. People in the park stopped what they were doing and stared at the scene with concern. Some parents stepped closer to their own children, thinking the police dog might act aggressive. But Bruno was not acting out of anger. His eyes showed deep worry and desperation. He barked again and again, trying to alert anyone who would listen. Sammy's mother stood up quickly and lifted her son in her arms. She asked Officer Amir why the dog was acting like that. Her voice carried fear because she did not understand Bruno's behavior. Amir tried to speak calmly while pulling the leash back, but Bruno planted his feet on the ground and refused to step away. His entire body leaned toward the boy like he needed to protect him from something invisible. Amir glanced around the playground, searching for anything suspicious. He looked for a wild animal, a broken object, a dangerous person hiding in the crowd, but he found nothing. Everything looked normal. The park was safe. The people were calm. The air carried no strange smell except for the fresh scent of trees. Yet Bruno continued barking with a level of fear Amir had never seen before. It felt like the dog was trying to warn them about something that had not yet happened. Sammy began to cry from the loud barking. His small hands covered his ears and his mother turned her body away from the dog, trying to shield him. Bruno jumped forward again with a desperate sound that made Amir hold the leash tighter. Parents from nearby benches began walking toward the officer, asking if he needed help and suggesting he take the dog away. Amir shook his head and tried once more to settle Bruno down, but the dog refused to stay still. His paws scraped the ground, his chest heaved with stress, and his barks grew more frantic. At that moment, everything changed. Sammy suddenly dropped his wooden car and placed his small hand on his chest. His face turned pale, and his breathing became shallow. A soft gasp escaped his mouth as his head rested weakly against his mother's shoulder. She panicked, calling for help, while tightening her hold around him. Her eyes filled with fear as she looked at Amir. Bruno stopped barking for a moment and lowered his head toward the boy with a sad whine, as if he knew what was happening. Amir's heart sank. He ran to them and asked the mother to place Sammy on the bench so he could check him. She did exactly as he said, her hands trembling. Sammy's body felt light and weak. His breathing was slow and his skin turned cold. Bruno moved close and gently nudged the boy's arm, trying to keep him awake. The dog's eyes filled with worry, like he was pleading for someone to understand the danger he had sensed so early. The mother explained in a shaking voice that Sammy had never shown any serious medical issues before. Amir checked the boy's pulse and felt how weak it was. He called urgently for medical support on his radio. The seconds felt heavy and long as they waited for help. Bruno paced around them, letting out small, anxious whines. The once lively park fell silent as everyone watched with growing concern. Amir tried to keep Sammy awake by speaking softly to him, but the boy barely opened his eyes. His breathing weakened even more. The mother cried softly, begging her son to stay strong. Bruno nudged closer again, resting his head near the boy's shoulder to offer comfort. The dog's presence brought a strange calmness to the moment, even though fear filled the air. Amir felt a strong wave of guilt because he realized Bruno had known something was wrong long before any of them noticed. The barking, the pulling, the desperate attempt to reach the child, all of it was a warning that they did not understand. The truth now felt heavy in Amir's chest. If he had reacted sooner, maybe Sammy would not have reached this dangerous state. As the minutes passed, the sound of distant sirens finally reached the park. The ambulance was coming, but Amir feared it might still be too late. He gently held Sammy's small hand while the mother held the other side. Bruno stayed close with his ears flat against his head, and his eyes full of fear for the boy he was trying so hard to protect. The quiet morning had changed into a moment of deep worry, and everyone stood frozen watching a brave dog who had sensed danger before anyone else ever could. The sirens grew louder as the ambulance rushed toward the park. Officer Amir kept his focus on the weak boy lying on the bench while Bruno stayed beside Sammy like a silent guardian. The mother knelt next to her child with trembling hands, trying to hold back her tears. Every breath Sammy took seemed slower than the last, and Amir felt the pressure building inside his chest. He knew they only had a small window of time before the situation became even more serious. Bruno suddenly lifted his head and sniffed around Sammy's clothes with sharp attention. The dog moved from the boy's shirt to his small hands, then to the wooden car that had fallen to the ground. His nose hovered over the toy for a few seconds before he let out a soft, worried whine. Amir noticed this and picked up the wooden car, looking at it closely. At first he saw nothing strange, but then he spotted small yellow dust on the side of the toy. It looked like pollen from a plant. Amir felt a sudden thought flash through his mind. He asked the mother if Sammy had ever shown any allergy or reaction to plants. The mother's eyes widened as she remembered a moment from the past. She explained that when Sammy was younger he reacted badly to a certain type of plant pollen near their old home. She had believed he had outgrown it, but now fear spread across her face as she realized she might have been wrong. She whispered that she had seen Sammy playing near a tall, old tree earlier, but she did not think anything of it. Amir turned his head slowly toward that tree. It stood near the edge of the park with long branches and thick leaves. Beneath the tree was a small patch of yellow flowers known to release pollen that could cause strong reactions in children sensitive to it. Amir now understood what Bruno had sensed. The dog must have smelled the pollen on Sammy long before the symptoms showed. The barking, the pulling, the desperate motion to reach the child, all made sense now. Bruno was not trying to scare the boy. He had been trying to save him. Sammy's breathing grew even weaker. His chest rose and fell with slow, painful motions. The mother cried softly and held his small hand against her cheek. Bruno lowered his head close to the boy and let out a soft sound that carried deep concern. The people in the park watched from a distance with silent fear as they waited for help. The atmosphere grew heavier with each passing minute, and even the birds had gone quiet. Amir kept checking the boy's pulse while speaking into his radio, urging the medical team to hurry. He could feel the pulse becoming faint and uneven. His heart hammered with worry because he knew how dangerous severe allergic reactions could be. He wished he had listened to Bruno earlier when the dog first barked. If he had understood the warning right away, maybe Sammy would not be struggling so much now. Finally, the ambulance stopped near the park entrance and 2 paramedics rushed toward them with medical equipment. They quickly examined Sammy and understood the seriousness of the situation. One paramedic prepared an injection while the other checked the boy's breathing and airway. The mother stepped back slightly but kept her hand gently on Sammy's arm. Amir stayed behind her, offering support with calm, steady words even though his own heart was shaking. Bruno stood very close, watching the paramedics with focused eyes. He did not bark this time. He understood they were helping the child. The paramedics worked fast, giving the medicine needed to slow the reaction. They placed a mask over Sammy's face to help him breathe more easily. After a few moments, the boy's breath started becoming a little stronger though still fragile. The mother sighed with relief but remained worried because the danger was not fully gone. They lifted the boy carefully onto a stretcher. As they began to move toward the ambulance, Sammy opened his eyes slightly. His gaze fell on Bruno, and a faint, weak smile appeared on his face. It was a small moment, but it carried great meaning. Bruno wagged his tail gently and followed until Amir held his harness and whispered softly to stay. Bruno stopped but watched the stretcher leave with deep sadness in his eyes, as if he was handing Sammy over to another guardian. The mother thanked the paramedics again and again before stepping into the ambulance with her son. The door closed and the sirens started once more, filling the air with urgency. The vehicle drove away quickly toward the hospital. Amir stood still watching it disappear while Bruno sat beside him with ears lowered. The officer slowly placed a hand on the dog's head, feeling a mix of pride and regret. Bruno had been right all along, yet Amir had not understood soon enough. The park slowly returned to its peaceful state, but the memory of the moment stayed strong. People whispered to each other about the brave K9 who sensed danger before anyone else. Some approached Amir and apologized for doubting the dog. Others thanked him for reacting fast once the signs became clear. Amir nodded politely, but his mind kept returning to the sight of Bruno barking desperately, trying to warn them. With the crowd slowly leaving, Amir knelt beside Bruno and looked into his eyes. He whispered that Sammy would get help now and that they had done everything they could. Bruno rested his head against Amir's knee in quiet acceptance, but the sadness in the dog's eyes remained. It was clear that Bruno cared deeply for people, especially children, and sensing danger but not being able to act immediately had shaken him. Amir stood again and took a long deep breath. He called the station to give a full report of the event. As he spoke, his voice stayed firm, but inside he felt the weight of responsibility. He promised himself that he would always trust Bruno's instincts even more from now on. A K9 partner had senses sharper than any human, and today had proved that once again. With the park now empty, Amir and Bruno began walking back to the patrol car. The sun had risen higher, but the air still felt heavy. Amir looked toward the tree where the pollen had fallen, and silently thanked Bruno for noticing something no one else could see. They drove toward the station, hoping for good news from the hospital and praying that Sammy would recover fully. Bruno sat in the back seat with his head lowered and eyes thoughtful. The loyal dog had done everything he could, and now it was up to the doctors. The race against time had begun, and all they could do was wait for the next update. As the ambulance carried Sammy toward the hospital, Amir and Bruno stood in the quiet park with heavy hearts. The sound of sirens slowly faded in the distance, but the worry remained strong in Amir's mind. He placed a gentle hand on Bruno's back and whispered that they had done their part. Still, the dog's eyes held sadness and confusion. Bruno was trained to protect, and he had tried everything to warn them, yet he had not been able to reach the boy in time. That thought weighed deeply on him. The park slowly returned to calm. Families left one by one, talking about what they had seen. Some praised the bravery of the K9, while others wondered how he had sensed the danger so early. A few parents walked over to Amir, offering soft words and small smiles. They apologized for misunderstanding Bruno earlier and thanked the officer for acting quickly. Amir nodded politely, but his mind remained fixed on the moment when Bruno barked for the first time. The dog had known something long before anyone else, and Amir felt regret for not responding sooner. Bruno walked around the area where Sammy had been playing. He sniffed the sand, the grass, and the small wooden car that still lay on the ground. His actions were slow and thoughtful, as if he was trying to understand how the danger had reached the boy. Amir watched him with quiet respect. Working with Bruno every day had taught him that a K9's senses were far sharper than any human could imagine. The dog saw the world through smell, sound, and instinct. What appeared normal to a person could feel dangerous to a trained dog. Amir picked up the toy car again and saw more pollen dust on its corners. It was a strong reminder of how something so simple could become so harmful to a child. He placed the toy inside a small evidence bag and planned to deliver it to the medical team later. The mother had mentioned Sammy had reacted before, but had never faced a reaction this strong. Amir knew that without early warning signs the situation could have turned into something far worse. The station called Amir to ask for details. He explained everything clearly from the first bark to the moment the ambulance arrived. The chief listened carefully and told Amir to return to the station once he was done at the park. Amir thanked him and ended the call. When he looked down at Bruno, he saw the dog sitting quietly staring in the direction the ambulance had gone. The loyal animal seemed to be waiting for news, even though he knew the boy was far away by now. A few minutes later, Amir guided Bruno back to the patrol car. The dog hopped into the back seat, but his posture stayed low. Amir felt a deep ache in his chest. He did not like seeing Bruno sad because Bruno was usually full of energy and pride. As the engine started, Amir made a quiet promise to himself. He would take Bruno to see Sammy as soon as the hospital allowed visitors. Maybe seeing the boy safe would lift the dog's heavy mood. The drive to the station took only a short time, but the silence inside the car made the ride feel longer. When they arrived, Amir completed the written report and handed over the pollen sample. Several officers came by to ask about Sammy and praised Bruno for his alertness. Bruno watched them with gentle eyes but did not react much. His mind was still on the boy he had tried to protect. After finishing the paperwork, Amir called the hospital hoping for news. The nurse explained that Sammy was still in the emergency ward, but his breathing had improved slightly because of the medicine given in the ambulance. He would be monitored closely for the next few hours. The nurse said the mother was emotional but thankful for the fast response. Hearing this brought a small wave of relief to Amir. At least there was hope. When the afternoon sun lowered, Amir and Bruno returned to the patrol car. Amir decided to visit the hospital even if they had to wait outside. Bruno perked up a little when he heard the engine starting again, almost as if he sensed where they were going. The hospital was not far away, and soon the tall white building came into view. Amir parked near the entrance and stepped out with Bruno at his side. Inside the waiting area, the atmosphere was quiet with soft voices and tired faces. The mother sat in a corner seat with her hands folded tightly. She looked up the moment she saw Amir and Bruno entering. Her eyes filled with emotion, and she stood quickly to greet them. Before saying anything, she knelt down and placed her hand gently on Bruno's head, thanking him again and again for saving her child. Bruno pressed his head softly against her palm, as if trying to comfort her in return. The mother explained that Sammy was resting now. He was still weak, but the doctors believed he would recover fully if his body continued responding well to treatment. She wiped her eyes and said she felt guilty for not understanding Bruno's warning earlier. Amir told her not to blame herself because no one knew what was happening at the time. Only Bruno had sensed it, and the dog had done his best to make everyone notice. A nurse walked toward them and confirmed that Sammy was stable but could not receive visitors yet. Hearing this, Amir nodded respectfully and thanked her for the update. Bruno stood close to Amir, but his eyes kept turning toward the hallway that led deeper into the hospital. It was as if he wanted to walk toward the boy, even though he did not know the exact room. Amir and the mother sat for a moment talking softly about what had happened. The mother shared how Sammy had been excited to visit the park that morning, and how she never imagined something so dangerous could happen in such a peaceful place. Amir listened with empathy and reassured her that they had taken the right steps and that Bruno had played the most important part. After some time, the nurse returned and said Sammy was still resting, but the doctor might allow one quick visit later. Amir stayed a little longer with Bruno, patiently waiting. The loyal dog lay on the floor beside him, watching every person who walked by, hoping one of them would guide him to Sammy. The scene showed how deeply Bruno cared, even though he had only met the child once. As evening approached, Amir decided to step outside for fresh air. The sun began to lower, casting a soft golden light on the hospital entrance. Bruno stood beside him with relaxed shoulders but alert eyes. Amir felt grateful for his loyal partner and proud of how brave he had been. He knew that without Bruno's early warning, Sammy might have been in a far worse condition. In that quiet moment, Amir realized an important truth. People often trusted what they could see, but a dog like Bruno trusted what he could sense. And sometimes that sense was the only thing standing between safety and danger. The day had shown how powerful instinct could be, and how vital it was to listen to it. With hope growing in their hearts, Amir and Bruno waited for the moment they would finally hear that Sammy had opened his eyes again. Evening settled over the hospital with a soft warm glow. Streetlights turned on one by one outside the tall building while nurses moved quietly through the hallways. Officer Amir sat on a bench near the waiting area with Bruno resting at his feet. The loyal dog was calm, but his eyes stayed focused on the corridor that led to the patient rooms. Every sound made his ears lift, as if he hoped it was someone bringing news about Sammy. A few hours passed slowly. Amir knew it had been a long day for both of them, but he also knew they could not leave without hearing how the boy was doing. Bruno stayed close, leaning his head gently against Amir's leg from time to time. It was the dog's way of showing comfort, even though he himself carried heavy worry. Amir stroked Bruno's back in slow, calm motions, hoping to ease the tension the dog felt. At last a nurse approached them with a small smile. She greeted Amir and said the doctor had given permission for a short visit. Sammy was awake and recovering. Hearing those words made Amir's heart lift with relief. Bruno stood up immediately, his tail moving with cautious hope. The nurse guided them down the hallway. The mother walked ahead, quietly wiping her eyes but smiling as she walked. She looked back and nodded to Amir, as if thanking him again for staying. Inside the room, Sammy lay on a hospital bed with soft blankets around him. His face was still pale, but his eyes were open and brighter than before. He looked tired but safe. When he saw Bruno, his small smile grew wider. The dog moved forward slowly, as if afraid to disturb him, then gently placed his front paws near the edge of the bed. Sammy reached out and touched Bruno's head with a soft hand full of gratitude. The mother watched the scene with warm eyes. She placed her hand on Sammy's shoulder and whispered how lucky he was that Bruno had been there. Sammy nodded weakly and tried to speak, but his voice came out faint. Still, his message was clear. He thanked the dog in the gentlest way. Bruno wagged his tail and rested his head near the boy's arm, staying still like he understood the importance of the moment. The doctor entered the room and greeted everyone. He explained that the reaction had been severe, but thanks to the fast response, Sammy was stabilizing. He would need rest and careful monitoring for a little while, but he was out of danger now. Hearing this made Amir feel light for the first time that day. The weight that had sat on his chest began to fade. He looked at Bruno with pride, knowing the dog had saved a life simply by trusting his instinct. The doctor also praised Bruno, saying it was rare for an animal to sense such a strong reaction before symptoms began. He explained that dogs had remarkable abilities to detect changes in the human body, even those no machine could sense early enough. The mother listened closely and looked at Bruno with renewed admiration. She gently stroked the dog's head, saying he was a true guardian for her son. After a few minutes, the nurse reminded them that Sammy needed rest. Amir thanked the doctor and the nurses before giving space for the mother to stay beside her child. When Amir called Bruno, the dog hesitated for a moment, not wanting to leave the boy. But Sammy smiled again and gave a small wave, showing that he was all right. Only then did Bruno step back and follow Amir out of the room. In the hallway, Amir knelt beside the dog and spoke softly. He told Bruno how proud he was of him and how he had done something truly brave. Bruno pressed his nose gently against Amir's hand and let out a soft breath. The fear he carried earlier seemed to fade now that he had seen the boy safe again. Together they walked toward the hospital exit with a lighter step. Outside, the evening air felt cool and peaceful. Cars passed slowly along the road, and the sky carried the last hint of daylight. Amir stood near the entrance for a moment, taking a deep breath. It had been a long, emotional day, but it ended with hope. Bruno sat beside him, watching the doors as if expecting Sammy to come out again. Amir smiled and assured him they would visit another day when the boy was stronger. When Amir and Bruno returned to the station, the other officers gathered around them. They had already heard the news from the hospital and wanted to see the brave K9 who saved the little boy. Some patted Bruno gently while others praised Amir for trusting his partner. The station chief walked out of his office with a proud smile. He placed a small medal on Bruno's collar as a token of honor. It was not for show but for real bravery and sharp instinct. Bruno stood still as the medal was placed on him, then wagged his tail slowly. The officers clapped and smiled at the dog, who looked both proud and humble. Amir felt a warm glow inside as he watched his partner being honored. He knew Bruno did not understand awards, but he understood kindness and appreciation. That was enough for him. Later that night, Amir and Bruno left the station for home. The streets were quiet and soft lights glowed from windows along the road. Bruno walked beside Amir with relaxed steps. The tension of the day had faded, replaced with a sense of peace. They arrived home and Amir filled Bruno's bowl with fresh food as a small reward. The dog ate happily, then lay on his favorite spot near the door, watching Amir as he sat on the couch. Amir looked at Bruno with deep affection. He knew a K9 partner was more than just a working dog. He was a friend, a protector, a silent companion, who understood danger better than most humans ever could. Today had shown that without Bruno's desperate barking, Sammy might not have survived. The thought made Amir grateful beyond words. Before going to sleep, Amir bent down and scratched Bruno gently behind the ears. He thanked him once more for saving the boy. Bruno closed his eyes happily and rested his head on his paws. His work was done for the day, and he knew he had done well. The quiet room felt warm with the feeling of safety and trust between them. Somewhere in the hospital, Sammy slept peacefully, his breathing steady and calm. The wooden car lay on a small table beside him, cleaned of pollen and safe to hold again. His mother watched over him with relief in her eyes, thinking of the brave dog who had warned them before it was too late. And in that moment, two different places carried the same quiet truth. A loyal dog had saved a child, and the world felt a little safer because of it.